If there is any one character in the Elder Scrolls universe whose name strikes fear in the hearts of everyone, whose power is almost divine, one called the King of Worms, Mana Marco. He is a very powerful necromancer who was very prevalent in the Elder Scrolls Online and Daggerfall. So what would happen if a world-dominating force were to, say, live through his alleged death in Oblivion and cause a reign of terror in Skyrim? Well, that is what we're aiming to find out, as today we will attempt to beat Skyrim as Mana Marco. So what rules do I have for this run? Well, it is pretty simple. The only spells I can use are Necromancer themed, so raising the dead, and because you're all so nice in the polls, I can also summon skeletons and zombies, most of the former. This run is mostly a fun run, so to speak, and the more I record, the deeper the rabbit hole became. So just how much of an evil tyrant will I be, and more importantly, how many bodies do I recycle to destroy the earth? Let's find out. Starting up as always with the character creator, Mana Marco is a high elf, so it is pretty obvious what race I will play as today. Though if I would have preferred to play as a Breton for the conjuration bonus, but oh well. I try to make my character as close to the King of Worms as I can, but given high elves in Skyrim tend to take long olive oil baths before getting on with their pompous day-to-day activities, I make my best effort. The Empire tries to off this son of a lich, but thanks to plot contrivances, I'm let go with a warning and burning down the town. My favorite. There wasn't too much for the intro, and I booked it into the keep with Roloff, given the Empire probably hates my guts. Given I can't bring the dead back to my bidding just yet, I don't do much for the intro, run into the enemy barracks to steal everyone's undies so everyone is in a bad mood, and in the totally not war crimes room, I open the lock to get some mage's attire, given I'm going to be playing as a mage for this run. I have played this intro so many times before, so it isn't long until I hiss at the sun and I'm touching the grass. Two things I despise, and time to get the massive setup part started. The first priority is getting the garments needed to at least look the part, some of which is located nearby at the bandit camp and Shrine of Talos. I also took the Mage's Standing Stone, really the standard start for an Orph run. And while I was in Riverwood, Lucian let me raise the dead, so already I'm starting to become the part, the cog in the Necromancer machine that shall lead to the machinations of a fallen empire. I tested my new raising toy on a rabbit, and it stood watch as a wolf ran in terror. Probably didn't want a watership down moment. Well, it isn't an Orph run without them rummaging through every Khajiit's chest for the important loot for enchanting levels. Though unlike most runs, enchanting won't be the most important thing. Funny because I'm going to be playing as a mage, but you will see where this will go. Needing to get the story on track, I entered Whiterun for the first time. Thankfully my existence is but a blip in distant memory. Nobody needs to know about my criminal record, such as doing Minecraft Let's Plays, or even making 2 seasons of Sims doing random tasks to avoid death like 12 years ago in a death game style reality show. Yes, I have always been this psychotic. God, it's really been 12 years? The real reason I came to Whiterun is to get the Soul Trap spell, which will be invaluable in getting the show on the road. I entered the crypt to see if there were any leftovers. Sadly, everything was picked to the bone, so I led them outside to be picked off by the guards. With their re-dead corpse on the street, I proceed to spam Soul Trap on their skeletal remains, hoping to tap into wherever their souls departed to an unknown time ago. The citizens of Whiterun would watch on in awe as some weird high elf stood in a stream, casting a dangerous spell at a pile of bones. Out of context, this sounds insane. In context, but another afternoon for me. After about 30 minutes of matching, my conjuration increased to 100, letting me pivot my channel from an Elder Scrolls and Fallout related challenge runs to the Dark Souls of challenge runs, also letting me summon 2 bodies from the dead back to life. Wanting to continue getting distracted, I thought I could offer Armin a hand with his troubles. I will get to that later. With my business in town concluded, I figured I should probably get the spells to get me through most of the runs sorted. I traveled to the College of Winterhold, cast Light to be let in, and get a lore dump as to why we can raise the dead in Skyrim. Despite Mana Marco's defeat at the end of the 3rd era, he still won in the end, and the Mages Guild disbanded. So now I can give all my victims a second chance, and nobody will bat an eye. I try to get what I need, and I am given a task to get sigil stones. I swear I am not doing an Oblivion challenge at the moment. I summoned a data from Oblivion, where my bone boys promptly put him back in his place. I also summoned a Frost Atronach to help me out. After beating him twice, I taunt the poor Daedra and he gives me his Dragon Ball. With the quest done, I am allowed to purchase the thrall spells, which have no expiration timer on them. And even better, if the body dies again, they don't turn to ash, meaning I can keep raising them from the dead. I also try to get the higher tier skeleton summons, but they were not wanting to spawn for me no matter how many times I punched Phineas in the face. But at least I do get some archers. Also, after the run, I realized that the skeleton summons are actually level gated, not conjuration gated. With the pieces falling into place, and I don't need a level magic anymore, I figure I could get the stone of the Lord of the Flies, and along the way I figure I could have some fun with the giant and the ice age. They weren't too keen on me summoning skeletons that seemed to have more health than their target practice. Thankfully the excursion wasn't too difficult, and I tried raising their bodies, but they were outside the level cap of my spells, so meh. At the Hall of the Vigilantes, I was too late to the party, but not wanting to miss out on the fun, I just raised the dead, and waited an hour so they turned into dust. I'm just making up for all the time I haven't been able to kill the Vigilantes, okay? At least the Lord Stone was a quick purification. Now, I can have some form of defenses. Now comes the next piece of the 3,000 piece puzzle that is my very disorganized mind, and that is getting a Necromancer lair to call my own. Along my travels, I out-Necromancered a Necromancer, and found the Ritual Stone, which is a very, and I mean very, funny stone, which if you know your Skyrim exploits, and you like to break Skyrim like an angry man-child breaks his keyboard when losing a bronze tier match, this will be very important later. Since I was in the area, I also cleared out Volthoom Towers to get the sword for Armin. The excursion wasn't too difficult, and I tried raising the bandit chief from his stupor, but I kept missing. There are dozens more bandits in the wild I can make my permanent pawn. Nothing else happened on my journey to the far east, well, besides getting jump scared by a water cave bear, and nearly shit my pants, along with coming across a very cozy spot which has reminded me of some other videos I should make at some point, if my brain can ever focus on one thing, and not closing out the game for a few hours to continue playing RimWorld. Eventually I found a little pond with a bunch of mud crabs in a room with a very spooky poltergeist with materials around. We get it, the haunted house ran out of a budget, so we're relying on strings moving up and down. Very original. Thankfully this excursion doesn't have any combat, but rather a bunch of puzzles. One had me picking up torches and getting Mana Marco's signature staff, awakening skeletons, and even falling into a hazy dream where I was surrounded by a bunch of floating subscribe buttons. That dream was very disturbing. Eventually, after poking around for a while, I finished solving my puzzles, and I'm let out of my cell, free to explore the rest of the abode. I do get the Bloodworm Helm for my troubles, which is a signature item of Mana Marco, along with the Staff of Worms. As for the Necromancer's Amulet, I straight up forgot about the amulet through the run. It would have helped immensely since combined with the helm and other perks, I could cast conjuration spells for next to nothing. Then again, I went into this run with zero research and I just winged it. Or lore-wise, I'm just trying to rebuild the Cult of Worms, and Calixto could serve as a good member. Well, with Sep, I forgot at this point, my memory is starting to go at my ripe old age done. All that remains is the crowning piece, the completion of my ensemble that will round out my build. On my way to the ruins I have my eye on, I came across a band of bandits. Sure, they do hit hard, but when you have a never-ending supply of skeletons on your closet, because you keep your YouTube channel a secret from most everyone, and you also never reveal your face or even your real name online, there isn't much to note. I did try to use the staff worms on the bandit leader, but it immediately turned on me. Quality assurance indeed. Thanks, Creation Club. A bit further to the south, I came across a rune I'm not even going to pronounce. My lisp instead will mess it up anyways. I decided to plunder through these ruins. I met with the ghost of someone who didn't have god mode or become ethereal on, and fell to her death, and wants me to finish her job. Fine by me. I tried making a more permanent companion, but the game thought ahead, and prevents there being two Katrias on the field at the same time. Just confirms they will make an Elder Scrolls Magic the Gathering set, and make Katria a legendary creature. The dungeon isn't particularly long, shocking for Dwarven dungeon standards, and it was all around well done. Just had to deal with a bunch of Thalmor, or as I like to call them, leftovers. Even if I don't have the ring and a mirror. I also found a cute Charizard named Lizzie who will help out a lot in the journey. Wait, Lizzie, hang on, don't fall! Lizzie, no! With the tragedy of Lizzie, I made sure every last Thalmor in this cave met with a very unfortunate end, and it got me the silly wind bow, which I'll only use for the puzzle of the locks. I actually managed to get it on my first try, partially using the logic to deduce obvious patterns in the structure and the role of symmetry to solve the conundrum, and looking it up online because I couldn't be arsed to figure it out on my own. I grabbed half of a CD, burned with a banger of a mix. If anyone remembers doing that, then I cleared out of the dungeon to continue the quest. While I am in the same general region of the world, I figure I could get the bridge piece knocked out. Besides showing a pleb and a bear who's boss, not much to note happened, except I marked a peculiar Dwarven dungeon for later. I arrived at Deep Forked Crossing, and after bumming around for a bit, I found my next blue cookie, and before heading to the next dungeon, I figured I could hit 2 birds, 1 stone. So I did a quick polar plunge, watched a legendary brawl between a polar bear and a walrus, and had an insane rambling with a fellow madman about putting squares into round holes. Instead of doing Afghan as usual, I decided to go for the next best dungeon dive for an Elder Scroll, that being Raldbethar. Plus it has another piece of the game disc that doesn't have anything on it and just downloads the game from the internet. You know, 2 birds, 1 tactical orbital strike or something. There were a bunch of bayonets here, some hit harder than others, and I decided to let the bodies on the floor hit other bodies. It went alright at first, until I exhausted my supply of living specimens, so I had to go back to the bone zone to deal with the lane. Yeah, the highwayman hits way harder than anything else here, and I was pretty cornered. Once I had a lane on the floor, I figured out how to use the thrall. The orb is off center, so by adjusting trajectory, I could have my first semi-permanent companion. I say semi-permanent because turns out he isn't very good with dealing with the Bakugan, and since Bakugan are immune to basically everything fun, I have to keep using my skeletons to come out on top. I cut my losses with Dufant, mostly because I have to get past these spinning blades of death. I just have to time my ascent up the stairs, and the rest of the dungeon was pretty straightforward. Forward into some Thalmor. I was getting pretty hungry at this point in the recording, so I decided to say hell with stealth and just do the dungeon the more express way. Overall, the dungeon isn't too long, and I'm in the final room, removing bones from the gears. Yeah, I am not dealing with a Gloomworker and a Dwarven Centurion Guardian, so instead of being smart and taking them on one at a time, I decided to just let them fight each other. And the plan works like a charm. The big angry robot crosses the bridge, and I sneak on by just enough to grab the floppy disk. Did I really just say that? Editor, please cut that out. Just enough to grab the floppy disk and make it to Afghan. I'm dropped off next to the Elder Scroll, so it's a quick dive into the Mushroom Land and grab the roll of toilet paper and skedaddle out of there. Funny how this random Dwarven dungeon is used for 3 separate important quests, and this run I got the Elder Scroll before Bleak Falls Barrow. All that remains in completing my limited edition CD set is in a Dwarven dungeon a little bit north of Riften. On my way there, I nearly became bear food because for some reason bone meal is not a suitable meal. In this economy, bone meal is almost a Michelin star delicacy. After hiking quite a ways north, I arrived at Cagdenzel, Washington, and had a fun party with the Frost Troll. My skeletons are not having a good time, mostly with the Frost Troll being way above their pay grade on my editor. I hope my editor doesn't plan to sabotage me in this video. After the troll was dealt with, I spent probably 30 minutes punching a teacher over and over in hopes for getting an upgrade on my skeletons. At least the adept or expert skeletons. I had 0 luck in getting the skeleton champion, so I decided to cut my losses and return to the dungeon. When I stepped inside, the faint recollection in my mind that hopefully is an early onset dementia, since I tend to forget things pretty often, remember the final shard is supposed to be in a side room next to the entrance. I saw the faint glowing light, and remembering the devil is supposed to have reservations with my soul, given how I play Skyrim and RimWorld, I didn't fall for the obvious trap. After looking it up online, turns out I had the wrong Dwarven dungeon. So a quick hike further north, I arrived at the most boring Dwarven dungeon in the game, and in the little hut to the south is the final pepperoni piece they skimped out at Little Caesars. Well, the disc is more real than the food poisoning they serve there anyways. With the pieces assembled, time to put them into their container. I just psyched my way west of Shore's bones with my bones, taking the time to train my restoration to get Necromage, though spoiler alert, I never managed to get the perk because level 70 restoration isn't the easiest to get in comparison to the other magic trees. In my blind wandering of a brain who hasn't completed this quest in probably 5 years at least, not much happened besides marking Everstead on the map for later, and I arrived at the compass who was pointing to this video sponsor. Inside the final dungeon of this quest line, I was honestly prepared for a long slog akin to most Dwarven dungeons. Instead, I just got a scenic walk through a high-tier comfy bridge, and I'm inside the super boss room. I remember distinctly what happens during the fight. Round 1 involves some spiders which are nothing to write home about. Round 2 is a bunch of Bakugan and turning off the steam. Then comes the big super boss, the Forgemaster, one of the strongest bosses in the game. My strategy for the boss is pretty straightforward. The marksman hangs out from afar, utilizing its weakness-inducing arrows to debuff the boss, while my minion does most of the dirty work, and all I have to do on my part is refresh the minion while avoiding the massive flamethrower of death. I might be known for my hot takes, but I'm at least smart enough to avoid getting myself into trouble like saying stupid shit, such as a Switch shoe is an appropriate price for what you get. Games though, at least I can say $80 is too much. The forgemaster didn't like these comments and decided to tell me, "F you. I'm going to have a phase 2 just to spite you." Phase 2 is largely the same, just avoiding the fire beam by easy sidestepping, and honestly the fight wasn't that hard, despite being one of the hardest fights in the game, and I'm at a very low level. Almost no hit to fight. Eventually Liberty Prime gives into socialism, and I can use the forge. Sure, the shield can disable enemies for 15 seconds, making them ethereal and immune to fall damage, or the ethereal staff can summon dwarven spiders or spheres or even junk, and could be its own challenge run, but the crown is where it's at, and easily the best of the lot, thanks to just being absolutely broken. I thank Atreya for being a helpful distraction, and the quest is complete, and the penultimate step in completing my build is done. And the final piece, the piece that breaks the puzzle and turns the game upside down. So the funny thing about the ethereal crown, its effect is that it stores the previous stone you interacted with. So say if I visited the ritual stone to get that silly power, then I travel to the lord stone for general defense, the ritual stone's power is stored onto the crown. So the game breaker part that makes the ritual stone absolutely broken, if you take the crown off and then put it back on, the day-long timer the ritual stone has to stay balanced is refreshed. Meaning, I can do some menuing and constantly be resurrecting the dead. While sure this might be a little too busted, especially for my no major glitches thing, I counter argue. This is the power Mana Marco seeks. So yeah, let chaos reign. I figured to get the show on track, I think a companion of the more permanent variety is in order. I could always just hire a companion to do the dirty work for me. I think given my extreme unique situation, I could always just create a follower, even if they are more meant to be a boss level enemy. And I have one very unorthodox person in mind. And for that, I traveled to the Reach and dealt with a very unappreciative wildlife here. Then climbed up the hill to talk to Khajiit about getting so damn high, I almost get altitude sickness. I checked the grocery list, and all I'm missing is some vampire dust. Well, sure, I could always just buy some off an alchemist. I am down to do things the hard way. Fight the current as you try to ascend the river of life, instead of just riding the flow of fate. Translated from Orf mental gymnastics, this means I travel to the vampire lair to do things the hard way. I let my skeletons plow through the weak thralls, and once everyone met their match, instead of enjoying their life in the afterlife, I give them a second chance, except for the enemy party. Only one problem though. There is some magic force field that causes everyone to be stuck on a doorway. I tried leading the sanguiphages to my posse, but everyone seems to respect the no passing zone. Very much unlike all the pickup drivers around where I live. Sorry, I don't want to drive 20 over the speed limit because the truck balls are 10 times the size of the drivers. After a while, I just say hell with the brainless undead, and just use skeletal archers to solve my problems because archery is just fun in Skyrim. And after finally dealing with that mess of a time with the undead, ashes to ashes, vampire dust is my dust, and I mend to the disco ball. I have all the loot I need. I returned to the Khajiit and had a very disturbing high. The other part of my drug trip, besides my dealer had some very crappy products for an exorbitant prices, is a prince of the illness is talking to me, wanting me to deal with a traitor priest at a nearby Dwarven dungeon. At least with this dungeon dive, I can actually test out my newfangled abilities to its fullest. The main deal with this dungeon is that everyone here has come down with an acute case of food poisoning, no thanks to my cooking, and they often lose their lunches. Every time I clear out a group, I pop off my crown and put it back on, go into my menu to re-equip the ritual stone, and let things progress. At first the battles are a little rough, my army is weak, without many to call my name, but one by one, the enemy's numbers fall, and mine rises. And the easiest way to describe my dungeon dives is like rolling a snowball down a hill in a hit wintertime comedy, where my numbers rise more and more, resulting in a giant oversized snowball that ends up causing massive property damage and several lawsuits where the victims realize this is reality, and reality is a bitch. Also, whenever I want to add more to my fold, sometimes I wait for my timer to expire, then refresh everyone's zombified state, hitting reload on the video to help encourage watch time. Thanks to this dungeon being probably one of the longest dungeons in the game, it doesn't take long for me to procure a modest-sized army, so much so, when I load into a new room, I am pushed ahead by a considerable margin thanks to my backup. At least with there being so many zones, my group can eventually catch up to me. Yeah, I think my Pikmin army is doing just fine. Okay, I think I might have too many followers at this point. Eventually, after wandering through this long dungeon, I met Archendor, who is one of the tougher boss fights of the game. Yeah, sure his frost attacks are weak, but he is unparalleled in his defensive prowess. he can teleport around the room, and the most annoying part, he has 100% magicka resistance. This fight was a test of patience, as my army who is still trying to catch up do flea bite damage as her Chendor teleports around and heals. It took a solid 6 minutes to come out on top, a death by 100,000 cuts, but eventually our Chendor leaves the land of the living. While sure on one hand I have my powerful skeletons, they lack charisma. There isn't much to these bones. Meanwhile, I can always use a more permanent follower, so I brought out my dead thrall spell and brought our Chendor back to life to do my bidding. Flat out, one of the best thralls in the game. Plus I can always walk around Skyrim with such enthralling commentary such as, or. And how could we ever forget the eternal quote, "Oh yeah, something something period is happy, and gives me a powerful shield that I can use for skooma money, but the real reward for this adventure is the friends we made along the way, that we kept repeatedly killing and resurrecting over and over. Maybe that is why I don't have any friends. Oh well, at least now I have a very powerful mage by my side. I wonder what other distractions I could get up to. Oh shit, I just remembered. I'm supposed to beat the game. How far in the video are we now? I swear my ADHD gets awful some days. For the outside of Bleak Falls Barrow, I let our Chendor have some fun with the bandits, and yeah, the vomit kinda wrecks the basic bandits. And for the insides, there are a lot of skeevers and weak bandits, so I bring them all to my fold. While sure the plunder does take out a few of my rats, I think 100 bites with rabies will take out anyone. Or turn them into a propaganda news outlet used to create imaginary scapegoats to redirect any vitriol towards. Maybe collective consciousness was onto something. Eventually came the wounded frostbite biter. Sure, it eats rodents for breakfast, much like tarantulas and a few other large spiders. Hell, even black widows can munch on rodents from time to time. And there goes all the arachnophobes. This is the Halloween special. I can be a little more morbid than usual. Well, the spider goes down easily enough, and I add her to the fold. Though it doesn't last long, because she's a little too dummy thick to make it through the wall trap. Though a lot met the horrible fate, which I find hilarious. I kinda skirted ahead of the group for the rest of the first section of the dungeon, much to my detriment, because on the snow bridge was a frost roll. I just sneak on past it with the rest of the group, and in the second zone, just return them to this mortal coil. Man, I'm just awful. Well, time for the boss, which is the Scourge Lord, which is definitely threatening. Well, I say that, but when you have an entire army at your fingertip on demand, it doesn't take much effort to gangbang the boss. I grab my stones, then return to Sovngarde to progress the main story. He probably thought I abandoned him and died in the wild. Well, plot contrivances happen, dragons attack, and now comes the first dragon fight. Well yeah, I don't have any thralls to bring it on demand. I have an army of the more alive variety to back me up. Suffice to say, the lizard wasn't much of a threat, even if it does a trick landing. Well, I get some souls to dine on, and next up is a cold hut with old men on death's door. Before climbing up the mountain, I thought some backup could help, so I brought the local thrall that hangs out nearby into town, so I can have some more powerful backup. Except of course our Chendor is such a champ, he ends up doing the town's work for them. With my zoo of followers behind me, the climb wasn't too dangerous. Well, I say that, but given I'm in the upper teens for levels, the enemies are a little more threatening than usual. Namely, a bear that couldn't leave me alone. I was also able to bring along a snowy saber cat. Yeah, with all this backup, the frost trolls stood no chance. Okay, maybe a semblance of a chance. But yeah, when you have the numbers approaching the infinite, any challenge can be overcome. All you need to do is throw enough science at a wall that either something sticks, or you end up breaking down the wall. Well, the retirement home turned into a petting zoo of sorts, at least until all the animals suddenly die because I forgot to feed them, and I play bear curling. And of course the plot relevant shouts, but I don't use them through the run. If I were to break the space-time continuum if I want to sprint across the world, it'd be enough for the game to realize that dead people should remain dead, and return them to their intended dead state, that being dead, and I'm dead serious. Next up on my merry adventure is Ustengrav. Having been refreshed by a 24-hour Rimworld addiction marathon back when I recorded this in August, since either I fall behind on making videos or I work so far ahead I need to have the foresight to understand what happens in 2 months, I forgot where the sentence was going. I recruited some spiders near the entrance to the crypt, and with the power of friendship, everyone came along with me to make brand new friends. So much so, the intro party to the crypt was especially lively. For once, someone invited me to a party, and that makes me happy. Thank goodness this is a carnival of chaos. Even one guy was throwing up from drinking too much, which is the one criteria for a top tier party. The rest of the dungeon wasn't too bad. With numbers on your side, the entire crypt falls without too much fuss. Though there is one problem when you have the numbers. Nobody likes you cutting in line so you have to wait your turn. I also heard Shendor return to the dead. He does not turn to dust, so I gave him a third chance. Can't be losing my friends now. The rest of Usengrav, instead of leading Pikmin to their deaths, I just sprint on ahead of everything. I don't fancy holding the door open for 3 spiders, so I cut my losses, get a parchment paper for a good time, but before then I made a pit stop to Solitude to let Rogvir get away scot-free. Yeah, everyone is not happy that I let a prisoner live and die. So there's a dumb idea in the back of my mind. I feel like getting another companion for the cause in a very roundabout way. Like instead of going to Disneyland, you decide to subject yourself in driving in Nebraska on the rural highways at 55 miles per hour, which is a fate worse than death. I decided to join the Legion and do in the Civil War. Mostly because I can focus. Yeah, focus. The real reason is just I want to see massive forts take themselves over. The first fort is full of bandits, and they do not play fair. I have to resurrect my allies quite often. Really, once I took out one of the real bandits, things could snowball from there. My health dropped low quite often in this encounter, and I had to pick Shendor off the ground a few times. Once the outside was taken care of, I had to search the fort to double check, but I discovered something tragic that had me in tears. Shendor is nowhere to be found. Inside the keep, I decided to bring along a little better backup and a bandit chief to help finish off the prison. I ran into a small problem in the prison. Nobody wants to follow me inside. The only thing that followed me instead was the feeling of everlasting regret, and an axe right through my skull. Eventually I could get everyone in the correct zone to finish off the encounter. Everyone despawned so I couldn't keep my bandit chief, but I enlisted in the Legion, and now I can start taking over forts. But first, I have a crypt to clean out. I arrived at the outpost alone. I really miss Shendor. Him and his incessant moans of approval. Yeah, I'm back to my old strategy of summoning the Bone Zone, at least until I can recruit a few members of the Stormcloak Rebellion to my rebellion. And it doesn't take long for things to snowball out of control. Well, yeah, sure, the soldiers are the very definition of cannon fodder. When you have the entire battalion pointing cannons at a squirrel, they aren't coming out of it alive. One by one, each of these Stormcloaks are persuaded into my van by the lure of novelty Halloween candy, that which more stores would sell instead of big candy. Snickers bars belong in pools, not my trick-or-treat basket, thank you very much. Much of the crypt was not very eventful. I mean, when the numbers game is in your favor, the dungeons go by pretty quickly, and this sort of dopamine rush of letting the army be at your beck and call is just exhilarating. I sure hope this rush lasts. As for the boss room, I think the Death Lord is amazed by my undead tactics. He thinks we are allies, at least until I tap him on the shoulder, reminding him I need his crown of thorns because being a ruler of Skyrim is that of self-sacrifice. Another religious symbolism and a parallel to the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. Wait, this isn't Fallout 3. Mindlessly beating enemies to a pulp because we don't need that intellectual shit in here. We are here for the funny psychopath making offhand comments. Suffice to say, the battle was very one-sided. I grabbed the horny crown for those with a Trojan and submission fetish that I kind of want to do soon to myself. Wait, delete comment. And instead of being a good little errand boy for the Empire, I hand the Mandela to Ulfric, betraying the Empire. Did you really think Mana Marco would want to help the Empire? Back at Whiterun, I beat Ulfric's little errand boy and give Balgruuf an axe for the holiday. He wanted the Dude Bro body spray that smells awful that makes everyone in a mile radius gag, not the weapon, and he tells me he wants a refund. I give the news to Ulfric and bully him around until he tells me it's time to siege Whiterun because like hell this delivery service is ever going to own up to their mistakes, costing a few bucks for a $1 trillion company. So as I pillage the enemy's fortifications, I knock down a few of the Whiterun guards, and I am ready to start the snowball effect. Only for me to discover something awful that really dampens the whole Civil War questline. The enemies despawn after they die, so the map isn't covered in bodies right for the taking. That really blows. Well, at least until I get to the city cell, where I recruit the defected and deflated Whiterun guards for doing their job, and we all besiege the keep. The guards at the front go down in a single swing, and there's nothing Balgruuf can do to stop an army of his own men. I get the Lesson Stiller Boomer to replace the much better Jarl, and now this means war. Since I can't snowball forts to my pleasure, much of the thrill for doing the Civil War was tossed out the window, disposed in a non-discreet manner, like some asshole throwing the lukewarm Starbucks out his window causing it to splatter on some unfortunate soul's windshield, causing a massive pileup. For the first keep, I let the prisoners out of their cell to join the party, and at least with my few starting members, I can start recruiting soldiers to the cause, including the cage dancer. There is a lot of confusion as who is good and who is not. The answer is simple. If they moan in pleasure, they are good. If they groan in pain, they are bad. So dig the sword in deeper, and soon enough they will moan in pleasure. Before long the fort is ours, and the next mission is taking over the Reach. On my way to the Reach camp, there was a dragon den in the way, and I figured I could try my hand at dragons since I have a few dragon fights coming soon enough. Inside the chest the dragon was guarding was the forgemaster's fingers. That was why the giant fire-breathing robot couldn't flip me off and tell me to f*** off. Thankfully the dragon wasn't too bad. There were a few bodies nearby to help with the dragon, and I get my next mission to do some discreet stealth in Markarth. Yeah, as soon as I walk in, the party was already started. Someone tried stabbing a poor innocent girl in the back, which I couldn't stop, but at least the assailant could get his payback. And then the cultists decided it would be a good idea to attack a poor necromancer who didn't do anything wrong in the middle of the public. There are some good ideas, some bad ideas, and some holy sh**, what are you on? Could I have some ideas? This is beyond all of them. But at least they will help with what's to come. I tried being stealthy, which normally works, but the guard was having none of it. I resisted arrest, and everyone in the Reach was coming after me, and it turned into a bloodbath. More than usual. Why is it that every time I try to do the Civil War, I attempt to break my war crime high score? Some days you just want to roleplay as an innocent civilian. In other days, the Geneva Convention is a to-do list. After I had my fill of carnage, I turned myself in. I mean, when your bounty is paltry for the carnage I caused, I figure why not. I blackmailed the steward for information, and what is better than a regular party? The after party. So I took the bloodbath to the streets, so everyone can be baptized in the glow of the afterlife that is taken away for the bidding of the still alive. Suffice to say, as a sadist who enjoys the occasional desecration of civilized culture in a simulated environment, this appeases me. There was even a vigilante in the streets, which I will have none of. Suffice to say, Markarth was pretty wiped out. More so than usual. Ultries even pointed out the mayhem. Once I was done hearing the moanings of the zombies, I escaped the city and cleaned up the stragglers, and as fun as going on citywide Slaughterfest is, I have already done this in a few runs already, and I don't want to feel repeated. I will keep bloodbaths to a minimum for the rest of the run. Well, for me anyways. We are going on long enough as it is. I then pilfered an Imperial camp, which they are still rather confused on which side of the coin I'm on. I'm on the side of the coin that always comes out on top. With that done, next up comes Sovngarde, and the trek there was fraught with a lot of dangers. Not so much the assassin, they are never a danger. More so the hunter that could never escape dialogue. I tried returning to the bow to the bandit, but he was just broke. So I let my toys play with the runaway coward. Also, saber cats are never fun. As for the fort, the enemies despawn when they die. Given my entire build revolves around enemies not disabling themselves from the game world to save on resources, the rush of amassing an army to self-delete themselves was sadly taken away. Meh. I wanted to see the Imperial soldiers do a triple front flip as they jump off the bridge. The penultimate mission of the Civil War is a rather quick in and out of the local inn. While sure I could do a fight in the middle of nowhere to dispose of the evidence, I much prefer the outcome of a two skeletons walk into a bar joke. The punchline is that people died. It is a sad joke. What was I saying? Oh yeah, speaking of people dying, I also decided to have a party in Morthal. It took a minute for the party to get going, but once the numbers were more in my favor, it was a fiesta for sure. As for the shoddy defenses at the fort, I just walked in. They really need to make better defenses. I still have half of Morthal with me, so when I went inside, everyone came to me. And thankfully the soldiers on the inside didn't despawn the moment their life was forfeit. Yeah, with my additional numbers, the fort was of non-issue. Before long the day is saved, everyone committed war crimes and immediately paid for the price of said war crimes, except for me. And yeah, already the final part of the quest line. The Civil War, when you think about it, is not that long. Before attacking the true final fort, I might have had a party in the streets of Solitude. I mean, when I'm feeling powerful or chaotic, most cities become a bloodbath anyways. Didn't I say a few paragraphs ago I'd keep bloodbaths to a minimum? Probably forgot about writing that. It is a miracle that my workers still put up with my antics. When I got to the final fort, I happened to look around and, on the ground, I found my old friend Orchendor. I am beyond elated. It's a miracle only the Dater could ordain. If you can't tell from my deadpan delivery, I am beyond happy to be reunited. With my ally, the fort was of non-issue, and with the power of friendship, my fort raiding days are over. With that done, now comes the time to raid Solitude. Pillage it to the ground. If only a paragraph ago I already did that, and now I'm just cleaning up the evidence. Much like fort raids, I can't resurrect the soldiers, but the fortunate victims of my crime sprees, at least I can bring them to the fold. Not wanting to sit through pointless dialogue, I just tapped Rike on the shoulder to speed things along. And yeah, with the rebelling in the streets, the battle is one-sided. So much so, Ulfric yelled at Tullius so hard, he broke Tullius' back, and now he lies on the floor as a paraplegic, unable to move whatsoever. Ulfric has too much honor to punch a guy in a wheelchair, so I'd be the helpful individual and take the brakes off the chair and push him down the hill into traffic. With the Civil War done, wait, did you actually think I'd let Ulfric live? Nah, I just got my compatriots to the courtyard, had to use some force to tell the soldiers I mean business, and it was another slaughterhouse. But in my phonics, the S's get slurred, so it's more of a laughter house. I am a joke, and Ulfric delivers the punchline right into the cement wall. That is gonna hurt tomorrow morning. Once the rebels were disposed of like the scum they are, I figured I could have a second companion, so why not? Welcome to the party, Ulfric. I will make sure your next few resurrections remain painful. When I returned to Riverwood because, oops, I forgot the main story again, Ralof isn't too fond of me desecrating his leader, so I had his leader desecrate Ralof. Yeah, the town isn't too big of a fan of wanton violence, so I had to wait a few days for things to calm down. I told Delphine it was my father's brother's nephew's cousin's former roommate that butchered half of Skyrim again, and she takes 3 very shady men into her secret basement. Not for fun times. No, just for her blowhorn. Also, when I traveled to the Windhelm Stables, the guards aren't too pleased with my antics of being a double agent and try to have me arrested. Sorry, you're all alone. Though she does tell Ulfric to get his head in the game. Nothing a few return from the dead commands can't fix. As for Selacanir, the fight was pretty easy. At least when you have so much backup, especially at this point in the game. Ulfric continues his Kenny spree and becomes a chew toy. Eventually the dragon was Blood Dragon and Bones. I talked to Delphine, and next up is the Thalmor Embassy. Assuming what is left of Solitude doesn't want my head. Instead of doing the embassy the normal way, I decided to just go in the side entrance. Well, I had to travel back to Riverwood since I forgot my bucket at home. What kind of Skyrim player am I if I forget my buckets? Oh well, one clip into the side of the building later, and I'm in. I am doing this because actually during my testing a Skyrim all stats to 100 run, that turned out way better than I could have asked for. Using the crown with 2 experience stone would have sped up the run, but the crown never worked for me. Not wanting to break the game, even more so than usual, I decided to just lock myself in the kinky jail as punishment. With the goods secured, I converse with Annoying again, woke Chendor from his nap time, and next comes the Ratways. The enemies down here come in single encounters, which means I can add more and more enemies to my fold without risking half of my party getting butchered for the 8th time today. Sure, Esbern, Thalmor agents have been seen in the Ratways. Would you like to see them? The escape was mostly uneventful, and really the dungeon was really short, and any backup that did show up was swiftly dealt with. On my way out, Shavari tried to attack a totally innocent civilian if you look past his long criminal record and wanted in 10 provinces. The guards don't take too kindly and swiftly dispatches her. I returned to Riverwood and exchanged dialogue with the pothead, and next up is Cloud Ruler Temple, which is surprisingly very close to the end of the run. On my way to the Forsworn encampment, I turned in the forgemaster fingered and paid a visit to the important tower that has no significance whatsoever. Whomever lived in there was at least nice enough to leave some pay-to-win Dwarven armor out in the open. Since I have a giant encampment of nudists, and the only action neckbeards will ever get in their lives, I figured some additional help wouldn't hurt. Thank you random guards who happened to be in the area. I also had some vigilantes that needed cold, something I really wish I had with my crew. Range capabilities. Nobody can hit the Frost Dragon, and it would not land. Well, it could land, but high up on a ledge away from everyone. Regardless, at this point, everything started to go downhill. Everyone was aggro on everyone. I blame the vigilantes for f***ing everything up as usual. At some point, I should do a run killing every vigilante out of spite or something. I really hate them, okay? I attempted to resurrect my compatriots and book into Karthspire. Thankfully, my useless backup could bail me out, but when I tried to fetch my bodies, they were nowhere to be found. Well, Ulfric was there, which I tried to bring along, but he isn't important. But the important thing is that I could not find Chendor. He was nowhere to be found. I looked up and down the road to no avail, and at this point, I think the lizard actually ate him. I'm doing a mess. I eventually said hell with it, and booked it inside Karthspire to maybe bring Ulfric to me. He would not come along, and at this point, he was gone from the world. I will not miss him. With everything falling apart more than my average RimWorld colony, I decided to cut my losses, and instead of doing puzzles, I just platformed my way up because high elves are the superior race. Filthy Nords. I let loose some worm guts all over the seal, got my plot relevant information, then abandoned these 2 losers for the rest of the run. Putting the story on high gear, I returned to the retirement home to try to get some easy coffin sales. All I got instead was an earful for not speaking up loudly enough. Okay, ditches it is. Before partaking in a horrible time with Alduin, I tried one last time to see if I can get an upgrade on my skeletons, and finally, I could buy the Skeleton Champion, which will definitely be putting in work momentarily. I shouted away the clouds, sadly not my once again worsening brain fog, and I convened with the Italian Dragon for information that I already had like 30 minutes ago. then sit back and watch the not pre-rendered cutscene that would cause the Windows 95 or Vista computers to fry up. And next came Alduin. The bowman and the champion made for quite the tag team. The archer kept debuffing the worm, and the champion got some buffs when fighting the dragon. Honestly, there wasn't much to be said. The champion is just that good. Honestly surprising. It would have been more entertaining to have Ulfric or Chendor, who I miss dearly, to have a go at Alduin. But it wasn't meant to be. Battle goes on for like a minute, and since I've already decided who the winner of the war is, that being the weapons manufacturers, I can then skip to telling my Uber driver to drop me off at the nearest cemetery. I'm not a creep, trust me. Ignore the shovels in the trunk. And then we rode off to Skuldolphin. With this being a new dungeon, I can go back to my old ways, where I start with a couple skeletons, and slowly transition to a different form of undead. With the amount of Draugr the game throws at you for this dungeon, the numbers game is slowly tipping to my favor. One less for them, one more for me. Not wanting to wait out dragons landing in weird spots, I booked it inside where my amassing army followed. Most of the enemies are starting to right their wrongs, and yeah, I am enjoying this very rapid proliferation of my forces. The second section started out fun. I have too many soldiers to my army, and upon loading in, I am clipping into the wall, so I had to TCL my way out. At first, only a couple came in, but soon enough, my small army followed inside. The dungeon is weird because of a single doorway. Enemies don't like going through it, along with my undead allies. Must be a force field that prevents cheese. All that means is that I need to let the two intervening parties follow one another to the meeting spot where what little meat they have left can be butchered. And the boss enemy at the end is an overlord. When Big Falls Barrow had a Scourge Lord. Boring. Eventually, everyone can join up for one big family reunion when you were the outcast and everyone ignores you, and with resetting the timer, I brought everyone outside with me. I was honestly worried I would be pushed off the ledge, but nope, I get away scot-free. One of the dragons I left alone decided to come back for round 2, and that was very one-sided. I have like 3 times the forces than I started. And because hubris is something I struggle with, both I have too much of an ego and severe self-deprecation, I brought out my bow just so I can aggro the dragons here. I haven't fought the duo here in a while. I think a lot of my Draugr are getting pushed off the ledge, because my immense numbers games were starting to dwindle. The Elder Dragon wasn't that hard, and the Frost Dragon went down all the same. And yeah, if my Pikmin army can have an easy time with the dragons, they can have our dwarves with the Dragon Priest. Sure, Nutgreen hits hard, but it is not immune to fall damage or an entire angry mob descending to its location. Sadly, I cannot resurrect dust bunnies, or else I'll have a rabbit problem in my house. I booked it inside the afterlife, and much to my surprise, everyone followed me in. Shora is going to be extremely confused. Since I can use any additional help I can get, I found Rike and Ulfric hanging out. At least I'm glad to have Ulfric back. I still miss Orchendor. After all this babysitting, I brought my small army to Soon, who is probably extremely confused by this whole ordeal. For Mana Marco, it is but a day of the week that ends in day. Sure, Soon hits like a truck and is cutting down my Draugr like butter, but when you have numbers by your side, there is nothing to fear. And he decides to let this massive army inside, where I headbutt some ghosts I cannot console command resurrect on. I don't want any dead bodies in the pacifist zone. Well, yeah, Ulfric dipped from reality at this point for the Alduin battle. I am not concerned whatsoever. I have an army at my beck and call. Alduin went down even easier than last time, and there wasn't much to be said. I had to break the rules as usual for pacifist runs, and boop Alduin on the snoot, and I could not beat Skyrim as Mana Marco. My word, that was a satisfying run. It is fun to watch things snowball with your army of the undead. Start with one, and slowly difficult encounters become trivial. And this isn't the true power of the Ritual Stone. You can have giants and mammoths join in on the fun. Honestly, it's just fun to dick around and watch things snowball out of control. Because of the whole disintegration of corpses and level gaining, regular resurrection is sort of boring. Oh well, I had fun with this nonsense, and hopefully you all did too. A bit of a fun run. As for what's to come next, it is a certain someone's birthday, so stay tuned to that. And a special shout out to all my YouTube members and patrons who are the first to join my undead army. Links to them along with my socials in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like, subscribe for more masochism, and any other ways to torture myself, even down below. This has been Orpheolus, and I'll see you all in the next one.